Cohen's testimony raises new questions about the legal perils the president and his administration are facing. And to explain why and how and what's next, we head to Los Angeles. We welcome David Katz, a former U.S. attorney for Los Angeles, and Jessica Levinson, professor of law and governance at Loyola University. So, obviously, Cohen, by the way, it's good to have you both with us. It's been a while together like this. Obviously, Cohen, your credibility or lack thereof would be an issue. So you brought documentation and other evidence to support his claims, and that included checks for $35,000, one signed by the president, the other by his elder son, Don Jr., both dated after the election. These were 2 of 11 checks which were reimbursement to Cohen for hush money he paid to Stormy Daniels in return for her silence about an affair she had with Trump. Cohen put it this way during the hearing: the president of the United States thus wrote a personal check for the payment of hush money as part of a criminal scheme to violate campaign finance laws. So, Jessica, this allegation is an allegation of wrongdoing by a sitting president of the United States, which seems to put a whole different take on all of this, puts it in a much more serious category.
I think it does and it doesn't. I mean, what we already had was Michael Cohen pleading guilty to violating federal election laws, these campaign finance laws, and to a sentencing memorandum by prosecutors, which said basically, yes, we believe Michael Cohen when he pled guilty under oath. And we have evidence that individual number 1 is President Trump, and that he directed Michael Cohen to violate these campaign finance laws. And so for me, yes, it's different to see it on TV. It's different to see him say, and when he was president, he was repaying me. But I think we already knew, frankly, that President Trump was already susceptible to potential criminal liability for these federal election law violations.
It's one thing to know about the details. It's another thing, it seems, to actually see the check with that really notable Donald Trump signature, and also knowing that this was ongoing whilst he was president. The chairman of the committee, Elijah Cumming, he was asked about the hush payment money and if he thought it was, in fact, a crime. This is what he said.
Do you believe that the president committed a crime while in office?
Based on what? Looking at the checks and listening to Mr. Cohen, it appears that he did.
So, David, if it is a crime, a violation of campaign finance laws, would that rise to what traditionally is considered grounds for impeachment, high crimes and misdemeanors?
Well, the president can be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors. The definition of that, we say, is political. In other words, it's up to the House what they're going to impeach, and it's up to 2/3 of the senators whether they're going to convict and remove the president from office. But certainly a campaign violation of this kind, along with everything else, and with the corroboration for it, like you said, a check from Donald Trump written in August 2017 when he's already the president. Now, of course, he didn't write in the memo portion of the check, this is to reimburse you for paying out of your pocket initially hush money to Stormy Daniels. But what else would the $35,000 be for? Coupled with the fact that Donald Trump Jr. also wrote a check during that same period of time. And then you have the testimony. There's also going to be corroboration from the Trump organization. They're going to be calling at least 2 individuals from the Trump organization for follow-up testimony in front of the House Oversight Committee. And, the remarkable thing about today, and I agree with Jessica, that it really is something to actually see it and hear it under oath. We've heard before that there were leaks or it was secondhand. But, we haven't heard in testimony under oath live in front of us from Flynn, from Gates, not from Manafort.
Yeah.
Here we suddenly hear from the ultimate insider, the person who Donald Trump chose for over 10 years to be his personal lawyer and his fixer. We've heard from this ultimate insider who was allowed to testify even though he's a former lawyer because of the crime fraud exception to the attorney-client privilege. Devastating information about the president. This was the day Trump dreaded.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to get to. So very quickly, Cohen went into great detail about the Trump Tower Moscow deal, which Donald Trump repeatedly, emphatically lied about during the campaign. Cohen says Trump wanted regular status updates. He says Don Jr. and Ivanka were also kept up to date. Here's part of the testimony.
Who were the family members that you briefed on the Trump Tower Moscow project?
Don Trump Jr. and Ivanka Trump.
Do you recall, there's a question on the number of briefings. Do you recall how many there might have been?
I'm sorry, sir?
Do you recall how many of these briefings there might have been?
Approximately 10
in
total.
Here's part of Don Jr.'s testimony from September 2017 to a Senate committee question. Did you have any involvement in this potential deal in Moscow? Answer, like I said, I was peripherally aware of it, but most of my knowledge has been gained since as it relates to hearing about it over the last few weeks. Jessica, 10 briefings is a lot more than peripheral awareness. Cohen is going to jail for lying to Congress. Is Don Jr. facing a similar fate?
I don't know. I think that he may have hedged enough with that peripherally aware because, frankly, 10 meetings, yes, it's a lot. But what he can say is, I have dozens and dozens of meetings every day. This was a fairly small portion of what I did. And I think that, you know, the bigger question that the American public should be asking is, why was the president repeatedly, that when he was a candidate, Trump, lying to us? And that's not illegal. This is not news to the American public. Politicians can, in fact, mislead you, and they do. And so I think what we have with Michael Cohen is, frankly, more evidence to back up the fact that, yes, in fact, everybody was well aware of this Moscow deal and that the president was actively trying to mislead the American public. And what I think is interesting is that it fed into Michael Cohen's overall narrative that, in fact, that this campaign was more of an infomercial. This was a branding and marketing moment, and that he didn't, in fact, intend to win. And therefore, he was trying to really clamp down on discussions with this Moscow project, which could have reaped him hundreds of millions of dollars.
And it seems the only sort of tactic which the Republicans on the committee decided to use here was to hammer Cohen over his untrustworthiness and the fact that he was a liar whose trousers were a raging inferno. Here's some of it.
If he lied, you are a liar.
Everything's been made of your lies in the past. I'm concerned about your lies today.
A convicted liar.
You're a pathological liar.
So, David, if Cohen's lying, then cui bono, whose benefit?
Well, I'm a criminal defense attorney these days, but when I was a federal prosecutor, too, we had cooperating witnesses. We would never have been able to prosecute any of these kind of mob cases or any kind of sophisticated fraud case unless you're willing to use the insiders. The insiders are people who've cheated somebody. They've lied. They've gotten down into the same sewer with the people that they're testifying about. But, you know, they say that you can't use bishops to try to get criminals. So they used Michael Cohen. I think people have to realize that Michael Cohen was actually a very effective witness. I think he came across as very believable. I've seen a lot of cooperators on both sides of it from a prosecutorial point of view and now from a criminal defense point of view. And he came through really strong. As I said, this was a day that President Trump dreaded. It came out terribly. I think the Southern District of New York, the prosecutorial agency, the federal one in New York City, is going to be on Trump and the Trump family for years over charity fraud, over witness tampering, over all kinds of other types of fraud. I think it was a terrible day, and I think that the Republicans on the committee, they did about what they could do. It was sort of like one of those days when you have a terrible witness against your client and you're trying to divert attention, because if you pay attention, it was really devastating, the amount of different kinds of fraud, the amount of... It's also political. Politically, you know, there's a swing vote in this country. How does that swing vote, how do the suburban moms, how do those sort of people react to this sort of thing? Here's somebody who was threatening to sue people if they released his grades. Here was someone who said terrible things about African Americans. None of this stuff is going to resonate with swing voters. So it's a political problem, but it's a mounting legal problem. I would expect impeachment is almost certain. That is, that the House will vote articles of impeachment on myriad things that were dramatized today by Cohen's testimony.
Which is the start of a process where he'll stand trial before the Senate, and that's not the end of it. But it's the end for us here. But next hour, we know you guys are sticking around. We want to talk about Michael Cohen and what he knows about potential collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. So thank you for this hour, and I look forward to seeing you both next hour.